Hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining me today. So at the moment, as you join me, I'm just having a look at a potential composition off in this direction. I'm out today to do some woodland photography, and it's early spring, but as I've probably spoke about in a previous video or videos, spring seems extremely late this year. And there are some signs of spring, but a lot of the trees just look like it could be winter. And the light's been a bit challenging today as well. We've had some very bright spells and then it's getting a bit overcast, but at the moment it is okay. Now for woodland photography, I'd probably be preferring mist and fog, but we can't always get those conditions. So I think it's important to really make the most of the conditions that you're given on a day. And potentially, if you're dedicated to your craft and you think you could improve the photograph, perhaps return at another time when you think there's a chance of fog or mist. So the light for the scene that I'm looking at is actually okay, but as I say, it's quite changeable. So I think I've found the spot from which to take this composition. So I'm going to go ahead, get the tripod out and see what I can make of this one. So this is a scene which caught my eye, in which I've been framing up a composition. I initially saw this fallen tree, and by exploring a bit more, there's been a lot that caught my interest. This is obviously quite a key feature in the shot. Just beyond it and to the left, there's another really nice tree which is quite bright and stands out. Then beyond that, we've one which is going pretty much straight up with no lean, and it's got a very interesting textured and coloured base to it, and there's a lot of interesting shapes and patterns going on off in the distance. So what I would like to suggest to anyone, and I think we can all potentially suffer from this from time to time, is that if conditions don't look perfect for what you've got in mind, so perhaps you'd love to go out and explore a foggy woodland and there's some bright sunny spells and you don't think it's ideal, just head out, practice your photography, make the very best of what you're given on that particular day. It's something that's really important. And even though the conditions may not be ideal, we've still got a lot of things that we can use to work in our favour. We've got our photographer's brain. We can look at scenes which we think will work in the light that we're given. We can move around, we can frame things up nicely. We can change our aspect ratios. Here I'm thinking of a 16:9. Normally I wouldn't like to include sky. Most of the time I wouldn't like to include sky in my woodland shots, but there's some times where we've got no choice and the scene's definitely still going to be a nice photograph. And at other times a little bit of sky can be complementary. So I think in this scene there's going to be a bit at the top right, maybe a little bit at the top left, but I think due to the slightly overcast conditions at the moment when I've been taking the photograph and the positioning of the sky, I think it's going to be an okay feature in this image. But we can use things such as a 16:9 aspect ratio, maybe to eliminate a little bit of the sky, zoom in a bit more and so on. And these are all things we can do using our photographer's brain, even though we don't get fog or mist. And we really just need to make the best of it. We've got lots of tools on the camera, of course, at our disposal. We can be creative with depth of field and so on. And yeah, it's just great to be out taking photographs and trying to really just push yourself in a creative way and come away with the best shots that you can, even though the conditions aren't ideal. So I'll show you the image I've captured here, and yeah, this is as good as I think I can get it today at least. So I hope you liked that last photograph that I took there. I definitely framed it up, set up a different composition than I would have done if it had been foggy or misty. But that's part of the fun of photography. It's the fact that the conditions are different every time we come out. They may not be what we personally consider to be ideal, but we just need to be creative and adapt and make the most of what we've been given. Now, you may have already seen in the video, this section here, how the light's been changing behind me here. And on a day in which there's a lot of fog or mist in the woodland, of course the sun can eventually break through and you can get variance in the lighting conditions. But generally speaking, if the fog is consistent, the light's going to stay fairly consistent for a long period of time. On a day such as today, when it's overcast and then the sun breaks out from behind the clouds and it gets very bright, you've really got to think of lighting conditions, what's happening to the scene, and where is the light coming from. So in this scene here, I've been photographing it in two different conditions, one when it's been overcast and one when the sun comes out. So when it's overcast, everything looks pretty good, and these three trees here are receiving some reflected light, and they were standing out even when it's overcast. But when the sun breaks out from behind the cloud, you'll see there's some nice shadows come across the scene. It's being lit from high up, obviously, but also backlit. And these trees really stand out, and we get some nice light on the ground, and the trees in the distance really stand out as well. So it's very interesting just to observe light on a changeable day such as today, and think about what it's doing to your composition. And as photographers, we're all going to prefer different looks to our images, so it's really personal taste, but something just to be aware of. But I quite like this scene. It's not framed up exactly the way you're seeing it in the video when I took the photograph, but we've got these three trees here. We've got one off to the back right along a sort of path which has got a lot of growth around it, possibly ivy, and it looks really good. It's quite dominant even though it's quite far off in the photograph. You can see the light's changing again just now, and I've got a fallen branch just behind here. And a very small feature in this photograph is, I think it's a stump here covered in moss just growing from the ground, and although it's small, because it's in quite an open area, it stands out, and I think it's got a decent bit or a fair amount of visual weight to it. And that and the branch behind it, I think, in the open area balances everything that's going on at the right hand side in that strong, dark, dominant tree. And we've also got some nice trees behind here. So I think overall, although there's some standout features in this image or standout trees, I think it's got good balance. And yeah, it's been very interesting to frame up, and been very important to just be aware of the lighting conditions on a day such as this. So if you're out in the woodland doing some photography and you'd have really liked to have some fog or mist like I've been talking about in this video, but you don't have it, something that I like to do is concentrate on the smaller details. So even if it's overcast or if it's quite a bright sunny day, you can still find some nice images by concentrating on smaller sections of the woodland. And I've found something here. We've got this white flower. There's another one just starting to grow here, but it's nicely perched growing out of this tree stump here. So it's still important to be aware of the light, where it's coming from, the quality of light, but regardless of conditions, you can really look at the smaller details and hopefully come away with some nice images. Here's a photograph I took in autumn 2022, and it's a good example of some of the things that I look for in the woodland when there is no mist, fog or stunning light. This was captured on a day of fairly flat light right around sunset, when there actually wasn't much light left to illuminate the woodland. You will see some fairly subtle side light on the trees, which helps, but what drew me to the scene were the patterns, shapes, texture, contrast and the colour palette. These are all ingredients which can produce a good woodland photograph even though you don't have amazing light or that elusive mist or fog. I've enjoyed being out today in less than ideal conditions for woodland photography, and it's something that I always enjoy doing, just challenging myself, enjoying my photography regardless of the conditions. It's not that they've been awful, but they're not as good as they could have been, obviously. But I hope you found these suggestions or ideas that I incorporate into my own photography useful for yourself, and something perhaps to consider next time you're in the woodland doing some photography in less than perfect conditions. As always, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate the time. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you hopefully in my next one.